History remembers the men of ancient Greece, the generals, the philosophers, the statesmen who stood before thousands and shaped the destiny of the ancient world with their words and their swords. But there was a woman who sat behind the most powerful men in Athens and pulled every string they thought they were pulling themselves. Her name was Aspasia of Miletus, and the story of how she came to hold more real power than any woman in the ancient Greek world, in a society that legally classified women as permanent minors, is one of the most remarkable and most deliberately buried stories antiquity ever produced. Tonight, we unbury it. In classical Athens, women were not citizens. They could not vote, could not own property in their own name, could not appear in court without a male guardian speaking on their behalf, could not leave their homes without a male escort in many social contexts, could not participate in the philosophical discussions, the political debates, the theatrical performances that defined Athenian cultural life. The Athenian woman lived in the gynekonitis, the women's quarters, a separate section of the home from which she managed the household and raised the children and waited for her husband to return from the world she was forbidden to enter. This was the most democratic city in the ancient world. For roughly half its population, it was a gilded prison. Aspasia was not Athenian. She was from Miletus, a Greek city on the coast of Asia Minor, in what is now Turkey, and that distinction mattered enormously. Because women from outside Athens, foreign women, Medic women, women who lived outside the protected but confining structure of Athenian citizen life, operated under different rules. They could own businesses, they could appear in public, they could speak. Aspasia did all of these things, and then she did something that no woman in Athens, citizen or foreign, had ever quite managed before. She made herself indispensable to the most powerful man in the city. Pericles was, by any measure, the dominant political figure of 5th century Athens. For 3 decades, he guided Athenian policy with a combination of genuine vision and ruthless political skill. He oversaw the construction of the Parthenon. He expanded Athenian democracy. He built the empire that made Athens the cultural center of the ancient world. He was also, by all ancient accounts, completely devoted to Aspasia. This was remarkable enough in itself. Athenian men of Pericles' class and status typically maintained a rigid separation between their public lives and their domestic arrangements. Their wives managed the household. Their relationships outside marriage were conducted according to entirely different rules. Pericles did something unprecedented. He divorced his Athenian wife, took Aspasia as his companion, and treated her as an intellectual and personal equal in ways that ancient Athens had no framework to accommodate. He kissed her when he left for the agora. He kissed her when he returned. Ancient sources note this with barely concealed astonishment, not because physical affection was unusual, but because he did it publicly, because he made no attempt to hide the fact that this foreign woman was the center of his emotional and intellectual life. But Aspasia was more than Pericles' companion. She ran a school. She taught rhetoric, the art of persuasive speech, that was the most politically valuable skill in democratic Athens, and her students were not marginal figures. Socrates came to her. The greatest philosophical mind Athens ever produced sat in Aspasia's presence and engaged with her as an intellectual equal, something he did with almost no one. Plato, writing decades after her death, has Socrates claim in one of his dialogues that Aspasia taught him everything he knew about rhetoric. Scholars have debated for centuries whether this was genuine tribute or elaborate joke. The fact that it was even plausible tells you everything. Because in Athens, where women were not supposed to speak, let alone teach, Aspasia had somehow become the most sought after intellectual in the city. Power in Athens came with enemies, and Aspasia had accumulated both in extraordinary quantities. The comic playwrights, the stand-up comedians of the ancient world, whose work was performed before thousands of citizens at public festivals, attacked her relentlessly. Aristophanes, the greatest comic playwright of the age, blamed her directly for starting the Peloponnesian War, the catastrophic conflict that would eventually destroy Athenian supremacy. His accusation was that Pericles had launched the war to avenge a personal slight against Aspasia. This was almost certainly not true, but the fact that it was considered a plausible explanation, that an Athenian audience would accept the premise that a foreign woman had manipulated the most powerful man in the city into launching a war, tells you exactly how much real influence people believed she held. The attacks escalated. She was put on trial. The charge was impiety, the same charge that would later kill Socrates. It was, in Athens, the accusation you brought when you wanted to destroy someone, but could not find a more specific crime to pin on them. Pericles defended her personally in court. Ancient sources describe him weeping as he addressed the jury, an extraordinary display of emotion from a man famous for his cold, calculated public persona. She was acquitted. But the attacks never stopped, and when Pericles died of plague in 429 BC, a victim of the epidemic that swept Athens during the early years of the Peloponnesian War, Aspasia lost her protector. She survived. She found another powerful companion. She continued, as far as ancient sources allow us to trace her, to live on her own terms in a city that had never quite been designed to accommodate women like her. And then history, as it so often does with inconvenient women, let her fade. Aspasia of Miletus never held a title, never commanded an army, never passed a law or cast a vote in the assembly she was forbidden to enter. And yet, in a city that defined itself by the power of speech, she was its greatest teacher of rhetoric. In a society that excluded women from philosophy, she debated with Socrates. In a political system that gave women no formal role, she shaped the decisions of the man who shaped Athens itself. History buried her because it did not know what to do with her. She did not fit the story Athens wanted to tell about itself. She still doesn't. This has been Whispers of Athens. Subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell us which forgotten woman of the ancient world you want us to uncover next. Because history has been keeping secrets, and we are only just beginning to tell them.